Welcome to Let's Talk, a call in show on the Skeptic Haven channel. Let's Talk is a safe place for atheists, those questioning or leaving religion, and anyone that wants to ask questions and have respectful discussions. From the US, call us at 984 789 4787. And from outside the US, call in from your computer using the URL on your screen. Let's get started.
This is Skeptic Haven. Let's talk.
Hey everyone. I am so glad to be back with USR because it's been a hot minute since we've been on.
Yeah, I'm always excited whenever I get to hang out with you, Sonny. I love working with you. You're awesome, and you've been away for a little bit, which we all know it happens. That's just what happens on this stuff, and so yeah, it's really cool to be back on and be back on with you. So not
Thank
trying to
you.
slight anybody else, not not trying to say like Wes or anything is terrible, but I mean
No.
there it is. It's said so.
Yeah, we wouldn't say it out loud though, right?
No, of course not. Definitely not on like a recorded show that's going to be up on the internet forever. That would be
No.
absolutely offensive to our wonderful
Absolutely.
producer.
Well, speaking of being offensive, tonight's topic is humanism the same as Christianity? Is it better? Is it worse? Let's have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
So just off the top of your head, just right now,
Mhm.
what do you think is better, humanism or Christianity?
Humanism. Because so the best place to go, obviously, for what is an understanding of humanism is the Humanist Manifestos. There have been a handful of them over the years. It doesn't mean that you have to accept every single thing that's written in them, but I think it's really worthwhile to read them. I think most people really like the second one the best, but that doesn't matter. That being said, one of the tenets of humanism is using skepticism and rationality to understand the world around us and get to what is true, right? And because as a tenet of the ideology, humanism has that and Christianity absolutely doesn't, humanism will always beat every other ideology, in my opinion. So because you don't have a method for determining what is true, that inherently makes your system a little bit shakier,
Yeah. I would say that I agree. I found a really great site. It's from chaplaincy.tufts.edu/humanism, if anyone wants to look that up. And they have the 10 commitments of humanism. And so I thought, let's just kind of go through them a little bit and compare them one at a time. So the first one is simply having empathy versus the 10 commandments, which is you shall have no other gods before me.
It's a bit of a contrast there, don't you think?
Yeah,
It's a bit of
empathy or
yeah.
God, having no God before me.
Right.
Seems a little narcissistic to me.
Yeah. The focus on each of those, is very, very different, right? And I think that's important. And again, that's what you see, or at least what I often come across when it comes to religions, is that there is just this radically wrong focus, and that focus is almost always on this all-powerful, all-loving deity, but apparently he doesn't really want you to love other people. It's problematic, but
yeah, it's like an abusive relationship.
Exactly.
He does what he does because he loves you so much.
That's right. He doesn't want to beat you. It's just to help you out. Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. So if y'all want to come in or call in and challenge us on what we're saying, we would love to hear that. Or if you are newly deconverting, tell us what your thoughts are. Please give us a call. In the meantime, as far as empathy goes, I think that is such an important part of being a human being, being an adult. Kind of when you start reaching that level where you can actually have empathy for other people, it's not just sympathy. It's like being able to put yourself in their shoes in a sense. Try to imagine feeling what they're feeling. That to me is the mark of a true adult, someone who has actually grown up a little bit.
Yeah.
So
And it's honestly something that's very core to us as humans, right? So one of the fascinating things about us as an animal is we really have that ability where not all other living creatures do. And that is a fascinating adaptation that our chimp brains got that others didn't, right? And not just to the point of, you know, the wiring in the brain being different to begin with is massive, right? But even beyond that, to the point that these mirror neurons, right? Like there's this whole structure in our brain that is essentially specifically just there so that when we see others in pain or something, that we also have a similar feeling. And like that's amazing. That's so freaking cool. That is just innate to us as people. And the other great thing is that like the whole prefrontal cortex area, right? The reason you don't have to make liver and onions ice cream is because this squishy part of the brain right up at the front just goes, well, I've had liver and onions and I know what ice cream is. Let's just kind of put myself in that situation where I've done both at the same time. It's beautiful. Like it's this incredible thing that just exists in all people. And it's like you don't have to you don't really have to put much work into it, honestly, because it just kind of happens naturally, which is awesome.
that's
Of
right.
course, it can be used against us when, you know, manipulators or you know, religious folk who think they're talking to a god. Like, unfortunately, those people can hijack that system. But yeah, like empathy is just a core part of being a person, and it's great. It's really, really cool.
Right.
It helps us.
Absolutely. So let's look at number 2, which is critical thinking, just engaging in critical thinking versus you shall you shall not make for yourself an idol.
Yeah.
I just picked one, so I may say it completely wrong than the way that you're used to it, but you shall not make for yourself an idol versus critical thinking. I think right there says it all.
Massive. Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Like again, that's one of the things that religions love to gloss over, right? And a lot of times you'll hear people say that are devoutly religious, well, my belief is based on critical thinking. Like my belief is, you know, as a core, that's a part of it, but it's not. And this is a demonstration of it. And it's a demonstration of it when you look at the 5 pillars of Islam. Guess what none of those pillars are?
Critical
Critical thinking.
thinking.
Yeah, it's not a part of it. And so it's like you can make that you can make that claim, but it's completely ad hoc. It's completely after the fact, you looking back and going, well, I think we used critical thinking. It's like, yeah, but you've actually got nothing to demonstrate that. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
again, it's literally just the second commitment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
God, it's hard to beat that, you guys. Like, do better, religions. I'm sorry.
I agree. I completely agree. It's and the problem is that they start with their conclusion and try to work their way back. That is the antithesis of critical thinking. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
there's also the fact that you are listening to people who are the supposed leaders, you know, and whatever they say has to be the truth. So, you know, those are not critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
That is following and being manipulated and reaching, already having the conclusion and then trying to find the ways that that what you see around you meets that conclusion.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
the rest of us, we don't have that safety net. We actually live in a world where we understand that things don't happen the way we always want them to happen, that we don't expect to live longer than the life we have right here. And everything else that we have to, you know, we want to answer these questions, we have to engage in, you know, the scientific method in some form or fashion to figure things out. We have to do the work.
Right.
We actually have to do the work. So, in my opinion, critical thinking is heads and tails above not making an idol for yourself. And besides, what exactly is that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. It's a
What?
little weird. I guess if you wanted to, if you really wanted to do that esoteric, let me take 30 minutes to explain one word, kind of thing, one could make the argument that really this isn't about like some graven image or anything, but actually it's trying to make the point that you shouldn't put your faith and worship into a concept that isn't true or valuable or good or blah 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 blah. But again, all that stuff is just BS after the fact. Like
Mhm.
you can make that claim after the fact because there's all this other junk, that people have been trying to do that for a long time because they recognize that there's kind of a problem with that in a handful of ways. And so it's like, okay, yeah, to like bring that into the modern world, really what we mean is don't idolize somebody, in such a way as to give your whole life to them, especially if there's somebody that, is a bad person or not somebody to look up to, but that's actually not the context. It's
Mhm.
not the context. The context is just flat out the fact that God was like, I just literally don't want you to have another statue and talk to it the same way you talk to me. Like that's exemplified by the rest of this story, where Moses supposedly comes down with the first 10 commandments and sees the golden idol and then is
Mhm.
all upset about it and has to go back up to God and get God to write the stuff down again. Fascinating.
So I'm just curious, why is
Yeah.
it that if Christians believe this, I mean, I would
Mm-hmm.
love for someone to call in who thinks this way. I would love to know if you are not supposed to have any idols before your
Mm-hmm.
God, then what is the flag? I
Mm,
mean, the flag to
mm,
me, it seems to
yeah.
be almost idolatry with
Mm-hmm.
many conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I won't mention any names, but there's someone
Just a
who
hint.
has been, yeah, there's been someone who has been kind of leading the pack, who's kind of
Mm-hmm.
a god now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who had even
Revered in such a way.
a
Mm-hmm.
golden statue wheeled out.
Quite literally a golden statue,
Oh
right? Like you can't
yes,
make it up. That's how ridiculous it
I
is.
know.
It's fascinating silly, but yeah, I
Just
agree.
don't
I think
even.
I think that, as well as the way that some denominations, idolize various imagery of Jesus, right,
Mhm.
as well too. And this is a big discussion in the Islamic world, right? So because of the concept of shirk, of not having partners with God, right? So Muhammad's not a god, right? But the way that some very hardcore Muslims talk about Muhammad, they almost kind of put him on the same level,
I
as
agree.
God. And so it's like, are they committing shirk here? Do they have an idol before their God, like the God of Moses said don't do? It's a really interesting discussion. But it does lead to some mannequins at clothing stores to literally not have heads because they think that having a depiction of a full bodied person is idolatry, which is fascinating. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
seriously, but this is what religion does to you. This is what religion does. So.
Yeah, I've often wondered, you talking about Islam and Muhammad, is the fact that you can't, or that a Muslim cannot just say Muhammad, they have to
Mhm,
say Muhammad, peace be upon him.
mhm,
To me, that's idolatry, and the fact that if anyone, not just you, but if anyone else makes an image of him, tries to depict him in a drawing,
mhm,
then they're worthy of death. Is that not
mhm.
idolatrous?
It's fascinatingly close in my
I
opinion.
I
Sorry.
would think
Yeah,
so.
honestly. It just is. This is one reason again why I love talking about this stuff when people say like, "Oh, you're an atheist. Why do you talk so much about religion?" It's like, well, it's really interesting. Like it's
I think
honestly
so.
really really cool. There's a lot of stuff to learn. Um I just happen to think it's all pretty silly, but
Well, yeah, but it's important to look at, because if you're going to live your life based on these rules, I
might want to
mean,
figure them out.
you might want to do, the critical thinking and
Mhm.
see. I don't know, just
Especially if you're going to be tortured for all eternity. And
just
and
saying, yeah.
the Islamic faith is pretty clear about that torture. So it's not as like wishy-washy as some of the Christian stuff is. It's pretty spot on. It's like, yeah, it's gonna suck, man.
Absolutely.
Even Muhammad supposedly went to hell. He had to dip his toe in hell because nobody is perfect, because again, that would be making them a partner with Allah, and that would be
Absolutely.
yeah, it's weird. And again, like I said, the don't get me wrong, hey, the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, you've all got an issue with this. You know
That's
who
right.
doesn't? The Hindus. Actually, this is the one spot where they really shine, where it's like, actually, we don't care, make all the statues you want, no problem. It's just
Buddhism does too.
Yep.
Just have big statues of fat Buddhas and
No
little
big deal.
Buddhas and skinny Buddhas.
Give them to your friends as gifts. Like, no problem.
That's right.
Here's a Buddha.
So I want to show Bree Badger. She said some things in here. The specific reason why they're not supposed to depict Muhammad is so that he wouldn't be made into an idol. Unfortunately, I don't think they've been successful with that. I would agree.
And it wasn't the entire time, right? So the Islamic faith really comes to us, back. I want to say it's so. Muhammad is supposedly around like 600-700-ish, right? But it's not for a few hundred years that we ever get any of the things compiled and so forth. The Abbasid dynasty and all these different conquerors coming out of the Persian area, yada, 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 yada. The point is that in the beginning, they depicted Muhammad all the time. We have images from like the 800s and stuff where it's very clearly Muhammad, and it's really not a problem. Now, unfortunately, many of those have been lost over the years due to people coming later on and being like, no, let's take all that down. But yeah, it's not as old in that religion as, some people like to make it seem. Mainly it's like the hardcore Islamic apologists that like to say like, no, we never showed his face. It's like, no, you did. We've got it. So
It's just fascinating. I just think it's quite fascinating.
It's fun.
Okay, let's go on to number 3. All right. So number 3 is ethical development versus you shall not take the name of God in vain. I look at because I have it on a big screen up here. So
That's okay.
yeah, I'm not just looking up to the heavens for the answers.
Sonny is getting the answers direct from on high, folks. This is the first proof we've ever gotten of a deity of any kind.
Just brought it down here. So ethical development versus you shall not take the name of God in vain. So I've often wondered about this, taking the name of God in vain. What specifically would constitute taking the name of God in vain? What do you think?
So a couple of different things. So historically, just saying God's name, right? You can see evidence of this in The Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie. So this is as a hilarious, big fan of Monty Python over here. Probably helped turn me into the messed up adult I am today, but we that's for another time. But there's a scene where there's a bunch of women that have fake beards on, which is just a funny joke because the women aren't allowed to stone the person if they do something wrong. So all the women want to, do it. But so anyway, the point is they're standing there to stone this man. And the reason that they're stoning him is blasphemy. They're talking about this guy basically took the name of God in vain. And his response is, all I said was that this food isn't fit for Jehovah. And the moment he says that, everyone goes, oh, and he goes, what? Jehovah. And they're freaking out about it. And like, yeah, that was a big deal. There was a period of time where just literally saying the name of God itself was considered, yeah, that's over the line. You can't do that. You can't call on God for anything like that, okay? You can only do that when you're like sincerely trying to speak to him. You say, look, Jehovah, I just want to do your will. Yahweh, please, help me understand what you want, for me to do. But any other context was big deal, right? Then it evolved into, you know, other things like God damn it, or, you know, Jesus Christ as like an expletive or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons that I still say that stuff today. Not only just because just growing up in the culture that I grew up in, but also because I know that it is specifically blasphemous to some people. And I think blasphemy is BS. It's a crime in some countries still, and that's
Mm-hmm.
garbage. That's absolutely garbage. So,
I think that is something I still have. I've had a hard time with because um, I was, and not by my parents, but by the culture that I was in.
mhm.
To say "God damn it" was the worst.
It
Like
is.
there is nothing worse
Yeah,
than saying
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And even now, I could say any other cuss word on the planet,
Hmm.
but you say that, and there's a little piece of me that kind of
Hmm.
just, because it was just ingrained in me. You don't say that,
Right, right.
and
But when you
it's
think
not
about it,
stupid.
compared to all the other things, right? Like there's no, you don't have that same visceral kind of reaction when you say like, "Allah damn it." You know, you don't have that same reaction when you go like, "Ah, goddess Kali," you know, like it doesn't affect you in the same way. And that's really, really interesting, honestly, because it's just this, because it does for other people, right? So for instance, there are many ex-Muslims out there that speak out, and one of the things I've heard a good bunch of them talk about is their difficulty with even trying pork,
Mm,
because Islam is so critical about pork, and it is so hardcore haram that once these people are away from it, even people that have been away for like 10 years, some of them just have a visceral
mm,
reaction where they literally start to gag when they're eating pork. And it's not that like they don't like the taste or anything, it's just been ingrained into them in such a way that it's hard for them to get out of that. And the same thing is true for us. Like there's still that moment. Again, we're both in the South, so like, yeah, you can say a lot of things, man, but stand around a bunch of people you don't know and just casually slip a goddamn in there, and whoo,
I
yeah,
know.
you want
It's
to lose some friends and alienate people. That's the way to do it. So
Yes, it is. Thank you, Fern Love Bond, who gave us a $2 super chat. While in Florida, people don't mind MFer, but God, I know
mm-hmm,
it's so
mm-hmm,
true.
mm-hmm.
It is so
They get
true.
real upset. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. It's unbelievable. I've actually had coworkers or people who know me very well,
Mm-hmm.
and I will let something slip, and they're like, "I would have never thought this of you." I'm shocked. I think my opinion of you has decreased a little bit. I'm like, well, damn, my opinion of you has now decreased a little bit
Well,
too.
goddamn,
It's terrible. It's just so
Jesus
terrible.
Christ, like,
Oh gosh, and then on the other side, there's ethical development.
oh
And I
yeah,
think that's an amazing thing to
yeah,
be striving for, developing our own, our individual ethical framework.
mhm,
And that's kind of interesting too when you think about it, because a lot of apologists, well, frankly, anyone will say, a theist will say, well, how can you have ethics,
mhm,
values, morals if you're an atheist? I mean,
right,
everything is just uh, a chance thing, and you're just atoms coming together. How can you have
mhm,
anything without some framework underneath there, some godly framework under that? And I find that very amusing,
mhm,
kind of sad too, because I honestly feel like the if the values that they are espousing, if they are showing those values to the world, that doesn't seem to me to be a good thing, the way that they're coming out. And I shouldn't say everybody. I don't want anyone to think that all Christians are this way.
mhm,
I'm honestly talking more about the fundamentalist
right,
Christians. But if you just look in the Bible, I don't see the ethics, the values, the morals. I don't see empathy. I don't see critical thinking either, but I certainly
mhm,
don't see ethics.
Yeah, and definitely not ethical development, right? Because that's not the point of religion. It's not supposed to be a starting point that you then grow from. Again, some people will try to justify their religion with stuff like that. Some people will try to say things like, "Well, yeah, I was shallow in my belief and my faith, and I grew, and I became a better person, and yada yada yada." But again, if you really are trying to take the religions at face value and grant them the charity of saying, okay, this is what they say, so this is probably what they mean, right? As opposed to just trying to flip it all around to be whatever you want it to be. But when you accept the religions as they are, the concept of growing ethically or developing ethically is flat freaking out. Again, I
Mhm.
just because I get to play around with a lot of Islamic apologetics these days, that always comes up to the front of my mind. So,
Mhm.
for instance, the idea of developing outside of the Quran makes you not a Muslim, bro. Like, so what ethical development can there be? God is eternal. God is the foundation for all things, especially goodness. God already said it, bro. What are we developing? What are we building on? Are you saying that us as fallible broken humans can build on the Almighty's plans, the Almighty's understanding of ethics? What are you talking about? And again, that truly is something that comes through in the other religions. The difference is that Christianity isn't really explicit about it like the
Mhm.
Quran is, like
Right.
Islam is, right? And the Judaism developed a beautiful culture of talking with each other and debating and arguing and trying to understand from a broader level. But that is something that culture developed outside of their religious practice. Because when you look through the Torah, that concept is definitely not what God tells you. God comes down and says to Abraham, kill your freaking son because I said so. There's
Right.
not a think about it and debate with your other intellectual friends, right?
Right.
That isn't a part
Absolutely.
of the story, right? Same thing with Noah, same thing with Lot, same thing with every single one of them. So it's awesome. It's awesome that is a part of the Jewish culture. It is awesome that has been incorporated into their faith in the Talmud and so many other ways. But again, it is not inherent in the tenets like it is in humanism. It's flat out in there, just
Right.
straight up and down. Hey, yeah, you kind of got to keep working at it. Like, good that you found this page on the internet. That's awesome. And here's a starting point, but you've got a lot to do. Like
Mhm.
that doesn't come from a religion. So
That's exactly right. So you want to take our first caller?
yeah. Oh, sorry. I
All
would have shut
right.
up. I would have shut up quicker.
Oh, I want to hear what you have to say. I'm not going to stop that. Come on now. That was good. So we have Emmanuel, him from Texas. He's a Pentecostal.
Hmm,
He says why Christianity is a very good faith.
sweet.
Um, hey, Emmanuel, do you have us on speaker?
Uh, can you hear me?
We can. If you have us on speaker, if you'll take us off of speaker, there's a little bit of an echo.
Okay. How about now?
Oh,
A
well,
little better. We'll go ahead and try. So it says here that you say the writings and doctrines of the apostles in the New Testament are credible. Okay, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, I have been on the show. I've called to the other show that Secular Rarity was hosting,
mhm.
and he he says that I don't know if it's true or not. If it's just a claim, he says that he have studied the scriptures as a Christian and as an agnostic person.
Mhm.
Uh, so if he read the scripture says that there's a God, and this God has a son named Jesus. So I don't know why he doesn't find credibility from this document.
Why don't you find
Because
credibility from the Quran? What's your reason for that? I'll give you mine in a second if you want, but what is your reason for not accepting the Quran?
It's just that like those doctrines, those like I don't think that those have any bearing fact. I think they're just
Cool.
like
Same for me with Christianity.
no sane person
Yeah.
I'm even like surprised that billions of people actually believe those things. You could actually tell that it's just mythology.
Yeah, my argument against Christianity is the same argument you have against the Quran. So where do we go from here? Wouldn't this be the point where you provide something that demonstrates the truth of the claims?
Okay, so the truth of the claims will be that let me use Pascal's wager, right? So I would
Pascal's
say
wager doesn't
that
demonstrate the truth of the claims. Hang on. It's not worth us going down this route, Emmanuel. You've already called into numerous shows. I know, and probably everybody here watching does. You've already discussed Pascal's wager with a lot of people, and you've been told exactly why. Even if we give you all the toys to play with in Pascal's wager, it doesn't demonstrate the truth of the existence of a God. All it demonstrates is that if you find it credible enough that eternal punishment exists, it's a good idea to try to not have the eternal punishment. That's it. But even then, it doesn't really do a good job with that. I think the best construction is probably by Liz Jackson. If you're not familiar with her work, go for it. She's a Christian. And that might actually help your side a little bit more, your position get a little bit stronger. But if we're here to demonstrate the truth of God's existence, let's try to have an argument for that.
Okay, so what I would say is, how we feel. Like, for example, when I sin, or we could call it like breaking God's law. Why do you think that you feel conscious guilt when you do
I don't.
immoral things?
I don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty when I do things that are considered sinful. I feel guilty when I do things that cause suffering or harm, especially when it's unintended.
Right. Harm to another person. That's something that Emmanuel, I want to ask you really quickly, because you've on all of the other shows you've asked the same thing, you've talked about the same thing. And I've wondered, what sin do you feel the most guilty about when you do it? What is it that you feel the most guilty about, that you feel terrible about?
Me personally, I have fall to lust and stuff. So,
I'm sorry?
like having urges.
Oh, okay.
So, and, my master said that whoever looks at a woman with lust is adulterous.
I think he also says you have to pluck out an eye.
That would be it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Can you control your thought?
I'm sorry?
Can you control your thought? That if you are lusting after someone, can you control it before it even happens, before it even comes into your head? Can you control that?
Oh, of course, because I think we could control it. I mean, it's not like I'm living in fornication and stuff. It's just that the idea will come and I'll just like to repent. And
But see, the idea, I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but you said that you just said the idea comes, so you've already had the thought before you react to it. My question is, can you control it and keep it from happening in the first place?
I'm not really sure because I've never lived. I mean, maybe prior to puberty, it might be possible, but like after you hit a certain age, it just becomes so much circular.
Take it out of this context, Emmanuel.
Okay.
You seem to have trouble when thinking about lust. So let's not talk about lust. Let's just talk about any generalized thought. That's really where Sunny's going. She's asking you, when you have that feeling of, gosh, I'd love to have a hamburger, Like, can you stop yourself from having that feeling to begin with before you recognize and respond to it? That's what she's asking.
I don't think so. I don't think we
Yeah.
could control
Yeah, I don't think
our
so
thoughts
either.
in that way.
So then how can
I mean,
you,
we
or
have
why
to
do you
try, of
feel
course, and live a second life to be perfect. But
okay?
I don't think
So
we could control ourselves in that
so then
manner.
why should you feel bad then? Why should you feel guilty, or why would your God say that that is a sin if it's not something that you can control? You can't keep yourself from having that thought to begin with. All that we can do in this life is respond. That's all. When we have a bad thought that comes into our head, or we have, and bad is certainly subjective. There are some things that I would say are we would all agree are bad, but if you have a thought that comes in your head, all you have to do is say, "Well, that was weird," or "That was really crappy," and you move on with your life.
Yeah.
The fact that you are focusing on it and then saying, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I should not have had that thought. It was such a sin." You're actually focusing more time on it. You're actually putting it more in the forefront of your world. And that's what I've not really understood with this. So
I, I
for
mean, there are
SR and I,
other
if a
things that
thought comes through my
I
head where
still
I
do
end
it
up
and I
liking,
feel uh,
Hang on,
pretty much
Emmanuel.
bad about it.
Sunny was still talking. Let her finish her thought, and then we'll give you the mic again.
so if SR and I have a thought, let's say that I'm walking down the street and I see this guy who just is unbelievably gorgeous. And that thought goes through my head and I'm like and I'm like, "Dang." I don't sit there and think about it beyond that moment. I just move on with my life.
Mhm.
Whereas it sounds to me like if you see a beautiful woman and you have these thoughts about her, you end up focusing on it for a much longer period of time because now you're worried that you have now committed a sin and that God is going to judge you because of it. And to me, that doesn't make any sense. It's life. It's who we are. It's how humans are made. We are social creatures and we are sexual creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And we have thoughts that we cannot control. We just control whether we act on them. So just don't act on it and you will be good.
Mm-hmm.
And boom, done. Done. You don't have to feel any more guilt about it. Just move on. Okay, you can speak now.
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Did you hear
it doesn't
anything
really
that Sunny
matter if
just
I
said?
have the thoughts as long as I'm not falling into fornication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so what about like the sins that I commit, knowing that I could control it, but I still sin? You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I go and listen to hip hop or whatever, and like ruin my day and stuff, right? So the thing is, like that's why I think God is so merciful because even though I keep sinning, I can still go back and have forgiveness from Him, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Emmanuel, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you go through life with that. I really am. If you feel bad because it's a sin for you to listen to hip hop. I mean, I don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry. It's horrible that you're going through life
Yeah.
worrying about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What all that we can do is the best we can do in this life, and the best things that we can do are treat other human beings with respect and dignity, and try to leave this world in a better place, or at least not a worse place than what we found it in the best ways that we can, and to not cause undue harm to other people, and if we do, to make amends to them for it. The rest of this, I mean, listening to hip hop or eating pork, like you talked about earlier, SR, or a woman wearing pants instead of a dress for some people, or any of those things. There's no use in wasting your life, this one life that you have, the one life that you know that you have, on any of that time. I'm sorry. That just bums me out for you that this is what you feel, and that not only do you feel this way and you feel so horrible, but you're wanting to share that with other people and have them feel horrible about things too and perpetuate that.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for you, Emmanuel. I really am. That sucks.
Uh, okay, so the thing is, by the way, I don't know if it's necessary to mention my ethnicity, but like in this like
Yeah.
black community, we have like hip hop culture and stuff, so it's very tempting to actually have to fall onto those sins. So, but the thing is, right now, I'm not saying that I feel guilty about the things that I've done in the past. I just feel bad at the moment, and after I repent of my sins, I'm good back again and get back to my good mood and stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and I don't do, I don't harm others. Like I've never harmed others, um, like physically or verbally or whatever. It's just like as I believe that until we die, we can't just be perfect. Uh, that's why even as a Christian, we need Christ to forgive us, right? Like secular rarity, we were speaking like before and stuff. It's like I don't really care about what other peoples are wearing, how they're living, or whatever. The only
It's not
thing that
very Christ-like.
do I have
God
the
cared about that stuff. So you're missing the mark there when it comes to God's perfection. So you're probably sinning, considering that most believing Christians consider sin to be something in the vein of missing the mark of God's all goodness and perfect plan for us. So, I mean, I think it's great that you don't care that much about other people in that capacity. I really do. It's just, in my opinion, completely wholly inconsistent with what your stated beliefs are. So,
And really quickly, what I think is much more of a not a sin. I don't think of it as a sin, but I think of it as something that we should always think about, and that's being, like I said, being respectful to other people. And I assumed that Fern Lovebond was a he, and they use they them pronouns, and that was wrong. So what I do, Emmanuel, is when I recognize that I have made a mistake, I say, I'm so sorry, Fern. And I appreciate so much that you have put that in the chat and made me aware, so that I can make amends and do better. And that's what we do. That's the best that we can do in this world, is we learn from our mistakes, and we try to do better as we move forward. I don't think that's a sin, but I do think that it was potentially hurtful. And so I think it's important to recognize that. I'm also, I'm not going to, we all make mistakes. I'm not going to think that I'm now destined for hell and I'm going to burn it, for eternity. But I do think it's important to make those amends.
The hell thing actually is just whether you are elect or unelect. That's upon the predestination of God. I don't believe that we go to hell or heaven because of the things that we've done. It's if we are predestined to believe in God, we go to heaven. Some people are destined to hell. So I don't really know. I'm not really. It's like whether someone goes to hell or heaven, I really don't care that much about it. It's just that as long as God elected me, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
how would you know if God elected you,
and
Emmanuel? What criteria would you use to determine if you are or are not elect?
once you believe in Christ, you can't really lose your salvation. So you have eternal security.
So if you
That's
remain
why,
a believer your whole life, that's your
yeah,
criteria? I know that that's not. I
It's
know that
just
that's not your criteria,
you have to
Emmanuel.
believe the Holy Bible is the Word of God. It's just that's
Okay.
the criteria, right?
So is Kent Hovind elect? He believes that the Holy Bible is the Word of God. Is he elect in your eyes?
I
It's
don't
fine
think
if
so
he is.
because I know that he has lived in sexual sin, and the
So
people
we're all
who are
sinners.
regenerated and who are new creation, I don't think they act that way. That's why Scripture says in James 2,
But it's not about
faith
the
out of
actions you
some
just
work.
said, right? It's about whether or not God elects you from the beginning. So whatever actions you do have no bearing on your election, right? By
No, it
your own
doesn't.
admission.
Has he believed though in the first
Yes.
place?
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
question that
totally. He has. Yeah, Kent Hovind definitely believes. Yeah, 100%. Same thing with the last pope who just actively allowed people to abuse children for years and hid them. He totally believed. So are they elect? I mean, it's okay if they are. I don't think there's a criteria. I don't think you have a criteria to even determine if you're elect.
I mean, I have a criteria, but
What
I
is
don't
it?
want to like quote scriptures and show you the criteria.
You can just give me an
It's just
overview
that,
of it. It's pretty simple.
okay,
How do you know you're elect?
I'm so, how I know is I have much trust. I believe in Christ. I believe Christ is the Son of God,
So you just feel it.
and He has forgiven my sins. That's the biggest point, right? I am
So
worthy of death
every
because I'm a
Christian,
sinner, right?
every
But He
Christian
gave me
is
life,
elect
right?
then.
That's what it sounds like.
Every Christian is elect. Emmanuel, I have enjoyed this conversation actually, but we have now been on 18 minutes and I think we're going to get on with our show, but I appreciate the call very much. I do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks much. I hope that yeah.
All right.
I'll tell you this. I'm glad. But it frustrates me. But I'm glad that the vast majority of believers out there, the largest swath, undeniably, in my opinion, and I feel very confident I can demonstrate this claim, the vast majority of believers are inconsistent with their beliefs. And I'm really happy that that's the case because that makes them a better person. Because being consistent more so with, let's just take the big ones, the three Abrahamics in Hinduism, because they're all pretty terrible. Being more consistent with what those actually say will make you a worse person. So I'm glad that he is inconsistent, as is the case with most believers, because again, the vast majority of believers are way better than their beliefs. So
I agree. I completely agree. That
yeah,
boy, that was interesting.
it's tough. Calvinism's fun though. I was kind of hoping we'd go a little into Calvinism just because it brings up a lot of really weird points that you have to deal with, like the fact of being elected. Like there is no criteria for that. There has never been any set of bullet points that says, hey, once you check all these boxes, that's how you know you're elect. There's nothing out there like that. So
Yeah, I feel bad for him in a way. I know he's called every show. We all know him.
mhm.
But he strongly believes what he's saying. I do believe that. I don't
Seems
think
though.
he's a troll or anything
Oh
else.
no, I think he's sincere.
Right.
Yeah.
And it bothers me that anyone would think that their thoughts, that there's thought crime and that I mean it just
Mhm.
uh that's so sad. And if I was a Christian, I'd say pray for him, but I'm not. So let's all just hope that something happens and he's free from the bondage of Christianity, I guess. All
I'm with
right.
you on that. Here,
Yeah.
here.
If you have anything you want to say, please give us a
Mhm.
call. We'd love to hear from you. And before we take any other callers or move on with our next point, I want to remind you to like, subscribe, hit the bell, check out our other shows on Skeptic Haven. You can spend your Wednesday nights at the Secular Soapbox. Thursday nights you can spend with me, Sunny Spot. And Bumblebee is on with me. She's my co-host. I
Ooh,
love her to death.
love
Yep. And then Saturdays, you can see the Global Atheist, followed by Women Atheist Unload. We had a great talk, by the way, yesterday. It was awesome. It was all on misogyny.
nice, nice.
And then, of course, Sundays you have Let's Talk. So be sure and check all of those out. We have a lot to offer. So moving on, we have number 4, which is on the 10 commitments of humanism. Peace and social justice, working towards
Ooh.
peace and social justice versus remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
Which day is that again? Is that Saturday or Sunday? I forget.
Well, it depends. Seventh
It
day
does, doesn't
Adventist.
it?
Yes, Seventh day Adventist think it's all about the Saturday. Baptists think it's all about the Sunday, but they all believe. Who's right? I don't know. Maybe the Sabbath is Wednesday.
It could be, honestly. We really, the calendars have changed a lot throughout history. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's been all up in the air. There were a good handful of times throughout history where a bunch of people just got together and were like, so you know how we have been counting stuff? Screw that. We don't like it anymore. Like literally during the French Revolution, they were just like, forget it. Let's just make weeks 10 days long now. And it's like, okay, I don't care. Like, yeah, apparently we could just do that. So,
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. So let's talk about the peace and social justice because honestly, I absolutely love peace and social justice. That's something that, that
how can you be against those?
I
Right?
don't know how can,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people. I mean, they're really it's interesting. The evangelical and Christians of that, the more fundamentalist think that maybe not peace, but the social justice part. It's the woke,
Mm-hmm.
it's the wokeness.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of lump that all in, and they
Yeah.
lump it in with cancel culture
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
all of that stuff. Which that's a whole other topic. That cancel culture is interesting when you consider that the ones who cancel the most are evangelical Christians. Just saying.
Tend to be more on the conservative side in the broad sense.
Maybe just a tad.
Yeah.
Because I learned today the evil that is country music.
Huh.
There is a singer. I can't remember what his name is now, but I heard about it today, and he had a song that everybody really loves or loved that was about love, like "Love Is Love" or something like that. And then when they saw the video, it was all about homosexual love, and all of a sudden he has been canceled.
Oh, really?
And
Oh man.
yeah,
I thought you were going to talk about try that in a small town. I thought you were going to talk about that garbage with Jason Aldean talking about acting like he understands what it's like to be in a small town or anything. Like,
I know.
come on, man. Like, you killing me, bro.
Yes.
I hate it when this is just a real quick tangent, I swear, and we'll get back to that because that's a really good point. But I hate it when people try to appropriate what it's like to be a Southerner. It really frustrates me on so many levels. And it's just like, hey, look, man, I get it. You want to cosplay and you want to pretend like you understand what it's like to be out in the backwoods, just you and your trusty hatchet or whatever. Like, come on, man. I know that's BS. Calm down with all that crap. It's just frustrating. But anyway, yes, I think that is a very, very good example of where we really do see cancel culture more than anything. It's not to say that there aren't sometimes on the left that people go a little too far. Like, yeah, of course, man, it does happen. But in general, the broad concepts, right, between that progressive liberal left kind of focus versus that conservative kind of, keep us where we are, remember the good old days kind of right focus. The first group is the one that's more comfortable with people branching out and expressing ideas, where the other one, the conservative side, is explicitly about making sure that if you go too far, we bring you back into the fold. That's the
Mhm.
whole point of those ideologies on a broad scale, you guys. So it's like, again, where is the canceling actually coming from?
Right.
And if what we're saying at the end of the day is, well, there are certain people who have been allowed, like just a hypothetical, like let's just say there's an international organization that has billions of dollars in a bank account specifically to hide criminals who abuse children, and then based on international law hide that person in their city, which is the world's smallest city. Again, this is totally hypothetical, couldn't think of any real life example here, but let's just say that type of Catholic Church, for instance, exists. Yeah, they're the ones that are big on the cancel stuff, because then
Right.
they don't have power anymore if you get to talk to God without talking to the priest. So like that whole Reformation thing, the Catholics were real big on canceling that stuff, bro. They were big fans of that. Like, so yeah, it's weird. It's
Yeah.
weird, but
Oh, well, let's go to our next caller. We have Jimmy. If the point of Christianity is to live by the example of Christ, wouldn't humanism pale in comparison to Christianity when it comes to morality? Him from Texas, and he's a theist. Welcome, Jimmy. Jimmy.
oh, we might. Do we have him on?
I don't see.
Might need to. I think he's still in the screening room. Okay, try again.
Hold on a second. It says if I will. I only have drop call. Do you have on? Do you see it on yours?
Yeah, let me see.
I'm
Hey,
not
Jimmy,
seeing-
can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There we
Hey,
go.
great. Yeah,
Yay.
we were awesome. What you got for us today?
Oh yeah, but I was just gonna go by the topic of the show
Mhm.
and comparing humanism to Christianity. I don't know if you guys can see the question I had written there, but it says, if the point of Christianity is to live by the example of Christ, wouldn't humanism pale in comparison to Christianity when it comes to morality? And
No.
maybe I could start off there.
Yeah, my response is no. And one really good example is, what did Jesus say, or what is Jesus reported to have said about slavery? Do you know?
No, well, I was
That's okay.
referring more to the example of agape that he expressed.
I understand the specific example you're trying to take, but the problem is that you have all the other baggage that's still with it. So once again, if you don't, that's okay. But let me just be clear. Do you know what Jesus is reported to have said about slavery? There are, I think, maybe a couple, maybe 3 in total, but there's one specifically that's coming to my mind right now that I'd love to use it as an example. So you don't know, or you do?
Are you referring to something in the New Testament?
I'm referring to the reported words of Jesus. So yes, that would definitely be in the New Testament. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
Look, I'm not trying to nail you to the wall here, Jimmy. I'm just trying to. If you knew it offhand, that's great because it makes it a little easier. But if not, that's okay. The quote is, "Slaves, obey your master." Jesus said that. That's the example that he has given to the world. Following that example makes you worse morally, in my opinion, for sure, than humanism, because following the commitments of humanism will never lead you to a place of telling people who are owned as property to stay there and obey the people who own them. So that's my response.
But are you sure it's in the context that you're portraying it in? Like, let's say
I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident about it, Jimmy. There's not much context that would make the phrase "slaves obey your master" mean anything else other than "slaves obey your master." I defy you to find context that makes that into anything else.
Are you referring to the verse where it says earthly masters?
Does it matter? Does it matter? He said, "Slaves, obey your masters." If you want to make it more specific, it just makes it worse. I can take your wording of it, but it just makes it worse because there he's definitely talking about slave masters.
You wouldn't consider this an example of cherry picking?
No, because it comes along with the example of Christ. Although, in fairness, just hang on just a second. In fairness, because I just got word from behind scenes, this is actually in Ephesians. So Paul is the one that is reported for saying this. So that's my mistake. I'll grant that. That is.
But
my mistake.
was Paul speaking, on behalf of Jesus?
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point of Paul's letters, is to tell people how Jesus wants them to behave based on his understanding of Christ's example. So.
And we didn't see maybe Jesus come on and say, "Wait a minute, Paul, you're wrong.
Right.
Hold up."
Right. We've never gotten a refutation from Jesus on that. But I will take back and say, like, yeah, I said Jesus said it, but it's not. It's Paul. So.
And interestingly, Bree
Oh, no,
states earthly masters was one particular translation's version. Other versions just say master.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and having been the New Testament and taking something of a context that I'm not sure how you specifically interpret it, but I wouldn't by this one passage just reject.
Is there any context? And it's okay if you say yes, it's fine. But is there any context where slavery is right to you?
Does slavery exist in the country you live in?
I'm asking you a question very specifically. I'll gladly answer anything you want to pose to me, Jimmy. Gladly. But I'd really appreciate it if you could answer this question. Is there any context whatsoever that makes slavery okay for you?
Of course not, but I
Cool.
think it's a little unfair to refer
good.
to a passage like that
not the
times
case
are completely different than.
That's not the case for God. That's awesome that you are better than Jesus and your God, but they disagree with you. They think there is a context where it does make sense. And again, trying to live by that example would make you a worse person, Jimmy, because now you would have a justification for owning a person. That's why humanism's better.
Well, I think it's complex in that,
I don't think so.
The times were very different back then.
Okay, that's where I want to jump in. I hear this.
Please, go ahead.
I hear this all the time, that the times were different. The times were different. But in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, there were very specific rules that were laid out about minute things. Don't eat shrimp. I mean, very minute things. What kind of fabric you can wear when you enter the temple, what color it has to be. There were all these rules. And it seems to me that God, that Jesus, that the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to say, could have simply said, "Thou shalt not own other humans as slaves. I decree this." And it doesn't matter if the times were different. He was God. He would tell someone to kill their son right now. We talked about that earlier. Kill your son right now. And if they didn't kill that child right then, they were going to be not in God's favor. Yes, God stopped it right before it happened, but I don't think that that's very moral either. All God would have had to say is, "Thou shalt not own other humans as property." It doesn't matter what the time is. If God is so weak that he cannot overcome the time that it's in, then I don't think he's really that much of a God, and I don't understand why anyone would worship him. I'd really love to hear what you think about that, Jimmy. What's your response?
Sure. Okay. I agree with you that slavery is never moral, no matter what time in history we speak about. But, I don't think it's, I think it's just seen it kind of black and white to just say that, because I get the impression sometimes from atheists that when they talk about the omnipotence of God, they talk about God as though God's some kind of genie that he could just snap his fingers and slavery disappears. I don't think it works that way, especially with Christian theology.
You
And
think
so,
God created
you know,
the heavens and
slavery,
the earth? Do you think God separated the waters above from the waters below and locked the Leviathan in its deep? Because if you think God can do that, I have no idea why God can't change the economic system of the day. Seems a lot less important on the second one, doesn't it?
I'm familiar with the examples you're giving.
You're not familiar with the examples I'm giving? The first ones were Genesis and the second one was Job. But in Genesis, it says God separates the waters above and the waters below. So God can do that apparently by snapping fingers, but somehow the economics of the day is too difficult. That's okay if it is. Iron chariots stopped God too in the Old Testament.
I mean,
But do you see the problems with this? Do you see the contradictory nature of this being?
I think, well, I don't have a literal interpretation of Genesis. You know,
you have to have a literal interpretation of some things in the Bible. Otherwise, you couldn't be a Christian. You have to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, was crucified, dead and buried for 3 days, and rose and ascended into heaven for the forgiveness of your sins. If you believe that's literal, how are you distinguishing between that passage in the Bible and the one where God magically snaps his fingers and makes the world what it is? And then you have to come back to the question, which is a problem in your view, which is, again, God can somehow do those things, but he can't make slavery not practiced. That's the problem. And it's on your side. You have to figure out how all this makes sense.
I do that, and I don't come to a conclusion like that. I'm not a Christian, by the way, but I do study Christianity, and I don't have that interpretation of it. But I will say, to respond to Sunny Shell, you know, that I first, you know, I agreed that I don't think slavery is ever moral at any given time. But I was going to say, given the time of the New Testament, or even for that matter, the Old Testament, you know, slavery was, you know, a major component to reality pretty much in every culture. And so, like, what would you say against, you know, I believe there's a passage, I forget the exact citing, but there's a passage that goes that you shouldn't punish your slaves unto death, or you can, you know, only whip them so many times within 2 days, but you can't beat them unto death. So it limits the punishment on slaves. And slavery being a huge reality during the cultures of the time, what would you say to that? Would you say that they shouldn't have a passage like that, and maybe the punishment can go on to death and no one bats an eye? Or
no, they shouldn't have anything like that. They should simply have, thou shalt not own another human as property. That's what they should say. Anything less than that is abhorrent.
No, I agree with that. But that
then if you agree, I agree, SR agrees, most of the people watching this agree. So we are more moral than the Christian God.
Yeah, because God disagrees with all of us.
Because he never, ever said anything that even hinted that you should not own other human beings as slaves. And it doesn't matter, before it even gets started, the whole indentured servitude thing. That is just a slight bit. So you didn't, you know, grab the young girls and keep them for yourself as the spoils of war. Instead, people can, you know, become a slave,
sell themselves to you,
to pay off a debt. I mean, that's just so much better. It's not. None of that is good. Any interpretation is not good at all. It's just not.
Well, what I was trying to say is that I really don't think of it in this like kind of black and white terms. Like, of course, slavery shouldn't be, it shouldn't exist ever. But it did, and I think it's kind of unfair to not acknowledge the fact that it exists in every culture in the world during those times.
I truly don't believe that Sonny and I are not acknowledging that fact. I think, in fact, the one who's not acknowledging the fact is you, Jimmy, and here's why. Because whether or not it existed in every culture, whether or not it exists today, does not matter. None of that has to do with the problem that Sonny and I are leveling. And basically, just to break it down real hardcore for you and be a little silly about it, God comes through on the parking space. God can apparently fix the atoms in such a way so that I get a parking space super duper close to the church doors, but apparently can't come down to change people's minds to make them stop enslaving other humans. That's a problem.
And
That's an issue.
Not only that, but he did, according to the Bible, he did intervene and demolish all kinds of cultures. He was the
Purposefully.
genocide. He knew about genocide. He was really, really good at the genocide stuff.
God's the OG on that.
He is.
Right.
And he commanded that people go in and, this group kills this group. And it was because he felt that they were being immoral, or they were not doing the right thing. So why couldn't, if he could do that apparently for other things, even small things, he couldn't do that for what was going on at the time, slavery? Because guess what? If he would have, perhaps there would have been hundreds of thousands of people who would not have suffered in the 2,000 years since.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the issue with what you're telling me here is one thing I hear from atheists, and I don't mean to, because I hear it put in this fashion. They refer to God as a so-called sky daddy, and they portray him to be this kind of genie. And I think that's an assumption right here. And what secular Rarity is saying is that, as long as you think of God in that fashion, then you're going to make arguments like that. And personally, I believe that to be a naive interpretation of God.
I get that this is tough for you to wrap your head around, Jimmy. I do understand, but let me try and explain this. I don't have a conception of something that I don't believe in. Okay. So what I do is I try to use the construction that the person is giving me, because since you've been on this call, really all you've discussed is this book, this old dusty book that's been around for a real long time that has a description of a deity. I'm just basing it off of that, man. And based on the description in the Bible, you have a stance that is blasphemous, which is fine. Again, I'm glad you are not as consistent as this religion wants you to be, because it leads you to a worse place where you accept slavery as a good moral outcome. The issue is, though, is that right now, I honestly don't even know how you're getting this conception of God anymore, Jimmy. And that's problematic, because it sounds like what you're doing is just cherry picking random thoughts that come into your head and putting them kind of on a simple model of this very old concept of a deity. But see, again, what I think happens there is you get baggage later on down the line. Like, now you have to explain why your God explicitly said, here's how to do slavery the way that I like. Whether or not that God is a magic genie sitting in the sky or an amorphous blob that's just love, it doesn't matter, because your conception of a deity apparently said slavery was good. And back to the original discussion topic of what you called in for, if we model our lives based on the way that this deity supposedly incarnated itself in the physical form and told people how to live, we would have to get that baggage and carry it ourselves. And so now we would have to come up for justifications as to why slavery is okay. Whereas that conclusion can never be reached by committing to the tenets or commitments in humanism. That's the difference. That's the very, very stark contrast between the two ideologies.
So, Jimmy, I'm going to give you the last word, and because we'll talk about it after you hang up with you. So I'm going to give you the last word. I'm going to give you 30 full seconds to tell us, after we've had this discussion right here, if the point of Christianity is to live by the example of Christ, how is it that it is more moral than humanism? And remember, so far we've talked about empathy, critical thinking, ethical development, and peace and social justice. So you have 30 seconds to make your case.
Okay. Well, you know, I could say the same to secular Rarity, that he's cherry picking, and he pulls out this verse, you know, where Christ is endorsing slavery supposedly, and then in doing so, he completely just throws out the baby with the bathwater, I think, and his example with agape, with infinite unconditional love, which is at the core of, you know, aspiring to be Christ-like, which many people don't live up to, but nevertheless, I think that's why it has a higher potential to be good for society and culture and so forth. And that's why I agree with it. And I think when you bring up stuff like that, it completely denies something like agape. That'll be it.
All right. Well,
Awesome.
thank you very much. We appreciate the call.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Again, another really great example. I'm super glad that religious people are not following their faith. I love it because it makes the world a better place, but it makes you inconsistent, and you should hope that your understanding of God isn't real, because you'll burn in hell with me just the same. The only difference is I won't have committed acts of slavery in the process, whereas you somehow justify it. So again, I'm glad that religious believers do not follow the actual understanding of their faith.
Yeah.
But the idea that agape love overrides everything else is essentially an abusive partner beating the shit out of you for weeks on end and then telling you, but remember that time I filled up your gas tank? Like, that's what that is. So I don't
And
see
everything
how.
is done out of love.
Right. It's all done out of love. That's the reason I beat the shit out of you. And it's all good in God's eyes as long as you get up after 3 days. Like, yeah, that's the reason that I stole your prepubescent daughter and made her my slave, is because I really want to show that agape style love. It's a cop out, and it makes your God equivalent to something that is so worthless, and it's frustrating, honestly.
Yeah,
It
it
bums
is.
me out when people do that, because your faith is your faith can be much stronger, Jimmy. I really do believe that. You can have better reasonings for the things that you believe. But currently you're just fine with being really inconsistent. And again, I'm glad you are, because being more consistent towards that faith would make the world a worse place. So
really quickly, we missed a couple super chats. We have Foreign Salas, who gave us $4.99. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. We always appreciate you. You're awesome.
yeah.
And then we have another one from Bird Love Fund. Yay! Omnipotent deity,
Yeah,
but
I like that
stopping
comment.
slavery is hard.
Yeah,
I feel that.
Yeah,
Oh,
seriously.
feel it.
It just like,
Thank
come
you, Fern.
on. You know, that's such a ridiculous answer, you know? Like, it doesn't matter what your version of God is. Like, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. Like, if you're basing that off of the Bible in any shape or form, you've got to deal with all the baggage that comes with it. And your God told people exactly how he wants them to take slaves. He is explicit. He even goes through the effort of saying, hey, actually, there's one spot, there's one group of folk you can't make your slave. And then he tells you the loophole. It's really weird. It's so super weird. He goes out of his way to be like, you can't make your fellow Jews slaves. And then's like, but if you really want to, here's how you do it. So again, that's what's coming through with Christianity.
It makes me think that maybe slavery is godly. Like, they say cleanliness is next to godliness. Maybe it's slavery is next to godliness, because it seems to, that seems to be the thing. And, so we're getting really close to time. We only have a little bit left, and we haven't even gone but through 4.
That's okay.
4 of them.
That's all right.
Yeah. That
These
means
are good tenants.
Yeah, we'll have to go through them again. Absolutely.
That's right.
And I want to thank everyone for coming on and viewing, and the callers. We may not agree with what you're saying, but we still respect you. We do respect you. We just don't respect your ideas, and that's the difference. That's okay. That's okay.
Absolutely. I love Christians. I do not love Christianity.
That's right. That's right. So I want you guys to remember, we've talked about it before, but we really, really, really need some volunteers. We're looking for volunteers to help behind the scenes. If you'd like to be a part of our team, send us a message on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And if you'd like to help our channel, consider being a patron. You can go to patreon.com/skeptichaven. So we really, really, really want some volunteers. I'm telling you, there's just a few of us, and we're doing a lot of work to make this happen. And some volunteers, you can get to know all of us. Get to know Wes, Wes.
We're gonna get yelled at when we go backstage. How would, if people want to contact y'all about volunteering, how would they go about that?
They can get a hold of us on any of our social media. If you see us on social media, you give us a message, because we will answer. Absolutely. And we want to make sure that we recognize our patrons. That's an important thing. So Wes, I don't have my list. Will you put them up and I will read them? Or Secular Rarity can read them. How about you read them?
Yeah. Once I get them. Okay. Sydney Davis Jr., Eric Ozels, Tara S., Ryan, Deneen Murphy, Dan D., Michael Wiseman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Sunny Shell, Aaron Colson, Phil Calderon, and Jamie West. Thank you so much, all you wonderful patrons. You help make this happen. That includes all of the times that Wes yells at us behind the scenes after the show. All of that. So yeah, you make that happen too. Just know that when you go to bed tonight, just know that you're part of that.
But we deserve it. We deserve it. It's all out of love.
Fair. It is honestly fair.
All right, y'all. So we're gonna sign off now. But in the meantime, always remember to think critically. Good night, everybody.
This is Skeptic Haven. Let's talk.